All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our final Regional Connections Committee for this triennium. Lovely to see people in the room and those of you online as well. We will make a start. I declare the meeting open. Dave, start with apologies. All right. Are there any other apologies that we're not aware of? Nope. Okay. Can we have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Wilson. And a seconder. Thanks, Councillor Doe. Right. All those in favour? Against? Carried. All right. Confirmation of the agenda. I'm happy to move that. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Are there any disclosures of interest? New disclosures? No disclosures? No. We will go to the next one. Which is the public forum. And we're very fortunate today. We've got two members of the public who would like to speak to us today. So first up, we will have Atalia. So if you'd like to come up, Dave will help you out. And yeah, if you'd like to leave time for questions at the end, I always find that's quite helpful. And you're welcome to remove your mask while you're talking as well.
I'm just giving some apologies from Mrs. Hokam due to work commitments. She's unable to be here, but she's requested that I read this letter to you. As the Māori proverb says, he hana te mea nui i te ao, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. In other words, public safety should be paramount, especially our most vulnerable children. The PTNs on Massey Street are excessive when compared to the other schools in Hamilton. 10 minutes is not a reasonable time for parents to safely drop off and collect their children from school on a busy state highway. This puts unreasonable pressure on parents and puts them at risk of making mistakes, which causes accidents. The rationale of a quicker turnaround so other parents can use those parks is flawed, as parents have been doing that for decades. During the day, there are usual car parks on Massey Street outside Frankton School, which is mostly likely for staff. As the PTNs are not policed or enforced, parents have ignored them since they were put in place in December 2021. However, the fact remains that it is a legal warning to the public, which potentially could result in an infringement notice issued. The defence to that scenario is the status quo. So therefore, you cannot issue infringements when by failing to consistently enforce since December of 2021, you acquiesce to your signs having no meaning or effect, thus allowing the public to carry on business as per usual, as if the PTNs were not there. So the conclusion is, unless NZTA, Waikato Regional Council or Hamilton City Council are going to police the PTNs Monday to Friday at express times, then legally you are misleading the public, psychologically abusing them, and putting their lives at risk of harm unnecessarily. Therefore, the PTNs should be removed as it serves no purpose at all, but is more evidence of the tax wastage of NZTA and creates safety risks to the public, especially our most vulnerable being our children. It is inevitable with over 600 students at Frankton School, there would never be enough parking on that side of the road. Therefore, the disadvantages far outweighs the advantages, if any, of the PTNs on Frankton School side of Massey Street. Furthermore, there are already agreement to remove those PTNs on Frankton School side of Massey Street, which was reached on the 25th of March 2022, with NZTA Nita Mitchell Goes and Gandeep Singh. So legally, that agreement is binding, and we want those signs removed as supported by the public petition. There was no agreement as to the bus stop being relocated, but we will proceed with that issue. And likewise, the bus stop to be relocated to a safer location, being 156 Massey Street. These two issues are currently before Ministerial Services, and it's been well over a month since we are yet awaiting a response, and hence the matter has been escalated to Nicole Rosie for a resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the way that you delivered your letter and what you've said. We've just got a few questions from Councillor O'Leary.
Thanks. Thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us. The points that you're raising are under Hamilton City Council, but I'm just trying to get clear exactly what you want. Do you want the P10s removed because they're not enforced, or you would like them to stay and you want enforcement? And also, are you a resident of the Massey Street or the area?
Yes, I've lived in Dinsdale for the last 40 years.
Okay.
And so I've been to Frankton School, and like almost my children are going there. The original agreement that was met, which was agreed upon with Nita and Gagandhi, was that we compromised. We'd leave at least 5 parks there by the pedestrian crossing, one being a disability car park, because we surveyed 26 schools throughout Hamilton and the norm was 5. So taking that whole space probably equates to 30, including the bus stop. When that wasn't there, that's excessive. So we actually want to leave those 5 parks there by the pedestrian as a drop-off pickup area and the rest removed. Nita said that she would remove the ones on the residential side, and yet we're still waiting. It's about a couple of months now. We're still waiting. So the issues are not only congestion. That was Hamilton City Council's solution to parking. But if they're not going to enforce it, then what's the point? I mean, because if they're gonna send out parking wardens to specifically that school, then what about the rest of the other 56 schools here in Hamilton?
Okay,
what makes us so special?
So your preferred approach is reduce the P10s down to 5.
Yes, that was the agreement.
Enforce.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions from our members? Especially those from Hamilton City? Or Waka Kotahi? Oh, Jess, just flick on your microphone. Thank you.
There we go. I just want to acknowledge your submission. I know that there's been some meetings with the community there, and there's something really, and we're definitely working on that. And I'll pass back your.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that matter to our attention again and again. Oh, Councillor Thompson. Go for
Chair
it.
Angela, I was just wondering, could we have a copy of the petition? Just to...
Certainly.
Okay.
We'll make that happen. Definitely. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you once again for coming in. Yeah, we appreciate your passion on this issue. Yeah.
I was just waiting for the questions because I don't want to be rude because I have other commitments I have to attend to, so I'll just quietly leave.
Yeah, no, we thank you for coming in. Yeah, it's always good to hear the issues firsthand. So thank you.
Thank you.
Right, we have our second speaker for the public forum. We've got Liam Carter, who's going to come and speak to us. Welcome, Liam.
Hi. You don't know me, my name's Liam Carter. I'm new to council, but I'm trying to improve everything around bikes and trikes. First, I'm 15 years old. Firstly, I want to address the fact that bus lanes aren't big enough for cyclists, motorbikes and buses, and some bus drivers aren't that friendly or polite with cyclists, causing us to pull off the road and wait for that bus to pass. Secondly, but most importantly, is bus bike racks. There are bicycle racks on some long bus routes, For example, Hamilton to Cambridge or Cambridge to Te Awamu. However, there is none for trikes or any in the city, especially in our major city, Hamilton. For people that bike into work and the weather quickly changes, or people who bike to the base and want to get from the base to Kmart across that road and can't walk that far, then taking a bike would be a good option. If it is possible, I would like to request a report done this term or next term on what policies can be done around racks for trikes and the bus lane policy. I know there are different signs we can put up around this. Finally, I would like to put my feedback on one of the regional bus projects. On page 84 of the agenda, there is a drawing of Clyde Street and Peach Grove intersection that is proposing better flows of transport to allow traffic to move through safely and quickly on foot, cars, bus and bike. It would be good to see more of these types of planning in other busy intersections of Hamilton. Thank you. I'm here to the end of the meeting if anyone wants to have a chat after.
Thank you, Liam. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Liam. Always good to see you, and you're so clear with what you want. Liam, just a quick question. In terms of the shape of your trike, because obviously you've got bigger back wheels, have you thought about, or do you know if other buses with their bike racks, which standard sort of carry a narrow bike, how it would fit on, and would it fit on the front or the back like other two-wheel bikes?
Look, I haven't looked into this properly, but I can send you an email later this week regarding what design would work better and where it would suit, because obviously we're changing a lot of these buses from petrol to e-buses, so why can't we just chuck on a couple of racks? It would take less than a week.
All right, thank you. I have no doubt that you will research that to the nth degree, so I look forward to that email. Thanks, Liam. Thanks, Chair.
Cool, thanks, Councillor O'Leary. Are there any other questions for Liam? Thanks, Councillor Thompson.
Yes. Thanks, Liam. Good to see you as well. Just in terms of you raised an issue around bikes and bus lanes. So are you referring to where there are bus stops that go into bike lanes, or where cyclists are expected to share bus lanes?
So in parts of Hamilton, there are bus lanes that share lanes with motorbikes, cyclists and buses. Now, I think we should be separated because buses thinks that it is their own lane, which is wrong because there's signs saying in some parts it's some lanes bus only, but in some parts there is signs saying bus only and cyclists, motorbikes and bikes. Now I think this is dangerous because buses don't realise that.
And have you had some experience? You've had some experiences where buses have gotten too close, or?
I haven't, but I've heard of people who have. I don't want to see it. We've had too many accidents. I'm just trying to make routes better.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing that report.
Thanks, Liam. And yeah, thanks for coming in. And now you know where we are. Yeah, please come and talk to us again if you need to. Okay, thank you.
Anyone wants to have a chat after.
Fantastic. Thanks, Liam. staff presenters will need to sit there, but if you wanted to sit or maybe on one of the blue chairs, then you might have a better view. Yeah, that's fantastic. There you go. Right. Right, we're going to do the minutes for the previous meeting. I'm happy to move that those minutes are true and correct. Councillor Tegg, thank you for sitting. All those in favour? Against? Carried. All right, the minutes from the hearings of the RPTP, we will do in two parts. So we will do the section A bit first.
Sorry, Chair. Just, I realise now I think we've accepted the agenda, and then we had an issue raised in the public forum where I'm just wondering where we would be able to discuss it with the item, was it?
Which
That
public
was
forum?
the bike rack issue. Is there do we usually have like an actions list or something that we refer to? Is there anywhere that it would?
All right, just on advice, probably this item that we're coming up now. So we're going to have a staff presentation, so we could talk about it during that time. So we'll just move section A first, then we'll go into section B, and we can have some discussion around that. Fantastic. All right, I'm happy to move that we receive or we resolve section A. Rodney, you happy to second? Thank you. All those in favour? Right. Against? Carried. All right, now on to the section B. Let's get a mover and a seconder so it's on the table. Councillor Tegg, you happy to move? And I'm happy to second that one. Yay. All right, it's now on the table. So, hear from staff.
Thank you, Chair. And can I pass on the apologies of Andrew Wilson, who is at present, who has COVID. And, and so I got a message from him this morning. I will do my best to answer as many of your questions as possible. But I'll also not repeat everything that was done in deliberations and provide as much time for questions. So what I will do, however, is I will briefly run through the key adjustments to the plan that came through the deliberations process in particular, and that have consequently been incorporated into the version that was circulated on Friday night. So apologies for not being able to incorporate that in the formal agenda documents, which is why the resolutions were worded as they were and have come through. You can appreciate the timeframes for the development of the plan have been quite taxing. Nonetheless, if I may just step through the changes. I guess the first point I would make is we'll be aware that the government has announced changes to what we currently refer to as the Public Transport Operating Model, PTOM. The panel discussed the extent to which those changes may affect the content of the plan, and indeed they may substantially affect not just the content of the plan in time, but in fact the whole delivery model for public transport. We're still yet to know the full scale and detail of those changes, so rather than try and anticipate those, the plan does note a new note's been introduced into the introduction of the plan, acknowledging that the PTOM, the changes to the public transport operating model and replacement of that with the sustainable public transport framework are coming, and that may necessitate changes to the plan in the future. Another key change to the plan through that process has been in relation to carbon emission reduction, which has been a slight reframing of the overall intent. I should say not so much intent, but a little bit of the detail in terms of how we get there. So you'll recall that the net negative emissions was the previous headline. That's been reframed as at least net neutral carbon emissions. The intent there is really consistent with much else that's done in respect of corporate sustainability and climate emission reduction, and indeed with biodiversity related matters where one first avoids everything that's avoidable, reduces the extent of what you've got left, and then considers how one might offset to approach, in this case, an at least net neutral outcome. Consistent with that, it is intended that rather than the advertising, the revenue from any busback advertising being directed to emission offsetting, for that to be directed towards that first component of that avoid, reduce and offset framework, towards funding pilot programs to reduce emissions by increasing patronage and contributing to mode shift. The second area where there have been some slight adjustments have been in relation to the interregional passenger rail. Interregional passenger rail, currently obviously Te Huia, but in this plan looking forward. So there was a slight adjustment there to enable or to provide support not just to re-establishing interregional passenger rail connections, but also intra-regional passenger rail connections. And also, in light of submissions, in particular from residents in the North Waikato, who have had a long interest in the establishment of a passenger rail station in Tuakau, as well as Pokeno and Te Kauwhata, to acknowledge that probably the next step for those services, or the next step for passenger rail in respect of Tuakau, would be best supported by an extension of the Auckland passenger rail network south into the North Waikato, including Tuakau and Pokeno. So just a slight adjustment there, making sure that the residents in that area know that they haven't been forgotten by the fact that the plan is in Waikato District at this time supporting the investigations into stations at Pokeno and Te Kauwhata. In respect of the regional accessibility, a slight adjustment there. And it's really a matter of providing some clarity to the aspirational service levels for public transport between regional towns, where it's currently just says to be determined. It was thought best for that to be reflective of the service levels within towns in terms of the hours of operation at least, so that it also matches 7 days per week, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's an aspirational service level, to be explicit about that. Now, in the version I had of the plan, I know that came through in some aspects. I accepted all the track changes and it didn't come through if you've left the track changes on, and I understand that's the case in the version that was circulated. That should be visible because it was an embedded graphic. In relation to special events, another matter of significant interest to the committee and to some submitters, the committee heard from submitters on this matter, and the original position of the plan was to maintain the current policy framework. Now that is basically the events have to have a daily attendance of more than 20,000 and be free access, at which point the regional council would consider provision of public transport, and we see that, for example, balloons over Waikato. Whereas for commercial events that have a ticket price, those were outside of the scope of the policy. it was recommended by the hearing, it's recommended by the hearings panel to adjust that policy so that up to a 50% cost of service provision, subject to those same tests that apply to free events, be available to special events, and that policy be reviewed after 12 months. And the intention there is to really recognise that the policy, that the intention here is to provide people with viable alternatives to private motor vehicles. There was some nervousness about the exact scale of what demand for that would be. The policy remains subject to the availability of budget, but after 12 months, the committee should be able to form a view on the sustainability of that policy and the settings within it. Accompanying that is a requirement for traffic management planning, which is the case for large-scale events. There were a couple of other small things that were amended along the way. One, I think in particular, just to note that there was some things brought to the attention of the committee. One of them was the +1 policy for disabled users or people that have needed a person accompanying them in order to journey. That is a policy that changed that was made during the last RPTP life cycle. It was missed from the draft plan. That's now been included. That +1 policy has been included in the plan as being recommended. And importantly, and the reason why I think the discussion that was mentioned that was brought through public forum is that you will see in the plan some actions in relation to service and infrastructure coordination, in particular first and last mile journey infrastructure on and off bus. Lastly, the matter of partnerships in the plan, partnerships between service operators, the Public Transport Authority and others, to ensure that driver workforce attraction and retention was reflected as a matter that the partners will work together to ensure. That's an overview of the changes that have been recommended that have come through, Chair, and with that I will pass to you and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark. So just in relation to bikes on buses, which we just heard in the public forum as well, could you just expand on how that might look?
Yes, through the chair. The plan, the hearings panel did hear several submissions in relation to facilities a range of facilities, including in relation to the carriage of bikes on buses. The position that the plan takes at the moment is to set up a process of having a look at all those matters again. There have long been some operational challenges associated with bikes on short haul buses, in particular because of the time taken to load and offload, which is why we see them on the regional services and not on the urban services. But in saying that, as services and routes become more differentiated between coverage and ridership oriented networks, that may be a policy that's worth having a look at again. So I think that sits alongside the on-road infrastructure, and you'll see a policy in the plan. Sorry, I don't have the number right in front of me. That relates to the strategy developed with road controlling authorities around the first and last mile journey infrastructure.
Thank you, Mark. And just on those points further, we heard from Liam that, changing to EV buses as part of our strategy for climate emissions. And alongside that is perhaps the opportunity to change the way our buses might look and feel and the size of them perhaps. So could it be that next triennium, the council then might look at that through the procurement policy and maybe look at some futures of new technologies, new buses that might be out there. Perhaps bus builders here in New Zealand are doing something quite different. Would that be an option that the next council might look at?
Yes, through Chair, I think that's absolutely an option, in particular for the major urban contract renewals. What I'm hoping to bring the new committee, new elected members up to speed with quite early, assuming I have that privilege, is actually to bring in a whole range of new technology providers in public transport across the board. We've had repeated approaches from bus builders, from new train carriage builders, from infrastructure providers in terms of, roadside stops and all of these kinds of things. And really, I'm looking forward to convening I'm not quite sure what we will call it, but something of a future public transport innovation session as a kickstart for the new triennium.
Sounds exciting. Thanks, Mark. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Chair Angela, I've just a note. So the current draft that's online of the public transport plan, on page 49 at 2.8.4, and then you go to policy 66. So I'll just give everyone time. So that's page 49.
Oh, Sarah, are we using the numbers at the top or at the bottom?
That was the bottom. So if we go to the policies, it says vehicle quality standards 2.8.4. I'm looking at the draft that's currently online.
So we're talking bus stop descriptions.
Yeah, so it's says vehicle quality standards, and it has P66. The council will provide external cycle racks on regional bus services where the vehicle is suitable and there is likely to be sufficient demand. Bike racks will not be provided on urban bus services. However, the council will continue to investigate ways to integrate cycling with use of public transport, etc. So my question is, if we've got something which is explicitly saying they will not be provided, then how do we have that, does that kind of close off then that broader investigation into whether it is actually possible?
In my view, no. I think what that does in the interim is that for operators and for our process of tender and current services where they operate in urban environments, there's clarity that unless that policy is changed, there's not bike racks on urban buses, but there's certainly nothing curtailing an investigation into whether or not that might be suitable in the future.
Is it clear enough then, or explicit enough within the plan that we will at least investigate how it might work, or if we can make it work?
Yeah,
that's something. I mean, I don't actually know if we're allowed to make any changes or if we have to just rubber stamp this after the hearing. It's been through the hearing. But if there was something which said, that the future use of potential use of transporting bikes on buses will be investigated. It's not, saying there'll be racks. It could be any number of
surely we have to line that
solutions.
up with the end of
Journey stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me it's that difference between an external bike rack, which we know within the urban environment is quite timely, and if your bike's on first and someone else puts their bike on top, it's quite cumbersome to perhaps get your bike off. And if we are moving to more fast and frequent bus services, do the two, do they line up? And for me, looking at, different bus shapes where you can perhaps get bikes onto the bus,
Roll it on.
roll on, roll off.
So,
So,
I mean, I guess I'm asking whether we're able to be explicit in looking into options. So it's not saying, so it won't be saying we would be looking at whether racks would work, but options for the transporting bikes on buses. So keeping it very general, not committing to anything, but just having an initial look at what.
yeah, so council will continue to investigate ways. Mm.
Do you think?
So yeah, sort of asking a process question. Are we allowed to make changes today before it gets recommended up to council?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I don't know the.
Do you have an answer on that?
Oh, no, it's just in the,
Given that you've received this plan by way of recommendation from the hearings panel, you do have the ability to make further changes and then pass those recommendations to council.
Thank you, Dave.
I think,
Last
The last mile,
develop
first
a
and
joint
last mile.
strategy with partners
Yeah.
for modal integration, including infrastructure. But
Yeah.
but it talks about infrastructure, which is a kind of doesn't necessarily, does that reflect the buses itself?
including vehicles.
Yeah, I'm happy to make a change. Have you got some suggested wording?
Just did. So it's infrastructure.
Yep, so including vehicles.
Is this to objective 5? Changing.
Subjective.
Strategy, including.
What page are you on, Angela?
Oh, that's 19. Diligent. Which is like, don't you? Page 4
Of the actual
item.
document.
your
Well,
agenda.
page 8,
agenda.
page 19 at the top of your agenda.
Oh, yeah. Page 4, page 19.
The big
Which agenda?
This item's agenda,
for this meeting.
this meeting. So those are our changes from the.
Would it say develop a joint strategy with partners for modal integration, including infrastructure and vehicles and vehicle design or something? First and last.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, I suggest that it will be simple enough for us to change that one to say including vehicles. That will tidy it up, because any onloading and offloading, and we heard about scooters and the likes as well. If through new vehicles, changes to the urban bus specifications or anything else that comes through that, we'll be able to integrate the stuff that's on the side of the road to the vehicles that are on the road.
Okay. Thank you. Does that need to be part of the motion?
I think
We'll have to note it as part of so we'll say something like that on the in the noted change. We'll note changes, because we're obviously not yet. So.
Excellent, thank you.
Anything else people would like to talk about? Councillor Teague. Sarah, do you mind just popping your light off? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, just some general comments for a start, and then there's another little tweak I'm going to suggest as the last one. Sorry about that. But just as a general comment, I think this plan, in its original version was a real step up from the last one. We received some really great engagement from the public, and then at the Deliberations Committee we had really good feedback from that as well, and I think we we managed to tweak a few things, which was good. But look, I just had a call from Councillor Jennifer Nichol just before the hearing of the meeting, and she suggested something, and I promised to raise it. I think it raises quite an interesting concept, and that's in relation to the advertising issue, and that is that we have, well, she suggests we have an editorial policy around that any advertising not promote fossil fuels and other harmful activities, and maybe our own, this council's own investment policy as a guide, because we've already made decisions around that. So I'm going to just float that as an idea and see whether there's support for it.
Thanks, Councillor Teague. I believe that we already have something along those lines already in the plan. Mark, do you want to elaborate?
Yes, policy 5 of the plan does have the council will seek to avoid advertising content on vehicles and infrastructure that promotes products or services that are known to cause harm, such as alcohol, nicotine products, and will require all advertising adheres to the code of the Advertising Authority Code of Ethics.
What page is that on the agenda? Thanks.
No.
Yeah.
We've got it on. Oh, great.
So, yeah,
Yeah, I suppose that's great. It specifically talks about alcohol, but it doesn't go further and talk about fossil fuels and other things that are in line with our policy. So if it could be tweaked to be more specific.
Would you like to strengthen it, Councillor Teague?
Yeah, well, to say, such as alcohol or nicotine products that promote fossil fuels and and other activities that infringe the regional council's investment policy.
submitted. Scope, but yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I think one of the challenges we have here is that we're now no longer within the hearings and deliberations process, and that this matter wasn't raised as a matter of submission on the draft plan or included in the draft plan. So I think at the same time, I would say that while not strictly bound by scope, I would say that the policy as it stands at the moment is probably sufficient. And I would encourage the committee to, insofar as possible, unless it's in specific reference to submissions made, to really limit the changes at this point. So it's just a side from me, but I do think that yeah, so I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Mark.
And we're all waiting for the ruling from democracy.
Yep. Dennis, in that second one in blue, it says content or that promotes products or services that are known to cause harm. Would you say that that would cover and capture what you have raised?
Well,
Seeing we've just had advice not to go out of scope as well. So.
well, I suppose we need a ruling as to whether we can actually change it, otherwise the debate's a bit moot.
I believe we've had advice that we can't at this stage.
So is that your advice, Dave?
I would concur.
Okay.
I would say that in application of the clause as it stands, it could be argued that can cause harm and you could cover it off that way. So from a wording point of view, don't need to change it to achieve your end goal here.
Well, I'm sure the message has got through. So, you know, if that's as far as we can go with it, then.
Thanks, Councillor Teague. Was there any further points of clarification? Oh,
Sorry, I'm been looking through my agenda trying to find the thing we were talking about before with about bikes on buses, but it might just be a point of semantics. But rather than saying bikes, could we say, you know, bikes or other mobility aids, walkers,
Shoes.
trikes, that sort of stuff.
As soon as I find the relevant. Yes, it is. Sorry, Madam Chair, I'm just hunting down the
that's
policies that we were referring to
That's
earlier.
fine. It's important to get this right, so take time.
Related to infrastructure and the actions. Here we are. So I would refer the committee to Objective 5. That's under 2.6 on from page 48. Those are the addendum of the addendum. And in particular, policy 61, or policy that's been amended, policy 61, which reads to ensure the provision of infrastructure necessary for a high quality end-to-end experience that's accessible and enjoyable for everyone. This includes meeting best practice quality and safety standards for stop shelters, footpaths, crossings, and other components of an accessible journey. Policy 46, which was added or amended through the deliberations process, which involved communicating, not just ensuring the communications were accessible, but the communications were about those facilities and services for accessibility. And then the action which follows that, which is action number 24, which is the one that was referred to earlier in relation to the development of a joint strategy, which isn't explicit in terms of cycles, bikes, or anything else. It's just really for integrating public transport services and micromobility options to expand the reach of services and enable first and last mile journeys for solutions for passengers. So I guess the reason I point that out is that there are other actions which aren't mode specific to walking, cycling, or others.
Ollie, does that make sense to you?
Yeah. One thing I would say is that quite often disabled people are forgotten or left out of things. So I think I'd quite like to see some wording in there, you know, that specifically sort of calls out or names things that are needed by disabled people to enable, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. So Through you, the chair, just to read policy 46. So I paraphrased that policy, but just if it gives you some comfort. Those in respect of the travel requirements that are explicitly acknowledged in the plan through policy 64, locations with accessible infrastructure, priority seating, areas, wheelchair bays on public transport vehicles, ability to travel with assistance animals, accessibility fare concessions, customer service channels, communication channels, and opportunities for feedback are those that are explicitly covered in policy 64.
Yeah, Ollie, I think you can take some comfort from the fact that we did have submissions from a number of members of the accessibility community as well.
Yep.
And I believe that we have included what they recommended from their submission. In that as well. Because accessibility is one of our anchor points within the plan, so yeah.
Great.
Does
Thank you
that,
for that.
does that sound okay to you?
Yep, no, that sounds good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right. Would anyone else like to raise anything before we move on? No? Okay. We have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Tegg, would you like to say anything further? No? Okay. Yeah, I would just like to reiterate what was raised the other day about the whole process on the RPTP, how incredible the staff have been to get us to this point so swiftly. Yeah, it was a goal of ours to have this done before the end of the terraneum, and I believe that we've made really good progress. And as Councillor Tegg said before, that the plan does reflect where we do want to head, and it's bold and it's ambitious and it's inclusive as well. Yeah, so I'm really pleased with where we've got to, and thanks to the hearings subcommittee for the hearings day and for all the reading and for the deliberations. I believe that we've come to a really good point, and I'm really proud of where we've got to. So okay, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I firstly just wanted to say thank you to the deliberations hearing group for the work that you've done to take feedback on board. And this is a really exciting strategy, I guess, from a Hamilton perspective. I'm really looking forward to this grid of high frequency buses operating in our city. Been a little frustrating, as we've talked about before, the bus driver shortage, to actually still be unable to deliver what the great plans that we have. But I'm confident that over the next 3 years, we will be able to start really delivering on that. Just really briefly, thanks, Liam, for your submission today. I do understand the challenges around having high frequency buses and allowing bikes and trikes onto them, but at the same time, humans are innovative creatures, and personally, bike racks would scare me. I feel self-conscious that I'm, fiddling around for the first time trying to put a bike on a rack while everyone's waiting. So, maybe they're not, and they take a bit longer, and you have to lift a heavy e-bike. There's lots of reasons why they might not be the solution, but there may be other ways, like, designing a bus to be able to roll your bike on like you do with a train. And I've given an example. When I worked in Auckland in the central city, I'd bike most days, but if I, being in a law firm, you'd often be there until 7 p.m. So, and the way home was quite dark. So I would then take the train, put my bike on the train and take it home, but then I'd have to roll it up a big hill, whereas the bus would have dropped me straight outside of my house. But those kinds of circumstances, whether people need some flexibility, And so I think it is really important for us to at least look into options here, because when you have that flexibility, then suddenly all these different options become a lot more viable. So I'm sure that we can be innovative in our thinking here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor O'Leary.
Yeah, thanks. Just echo my sentiments to thank the staff. As I did the other day at our deliberations meeting, it's been a really enjoyable process. And look, I think for the committee members that weren't on the hearing, we made through deliberations as a result of submissions, we made some significant changes for our disability sector. And that includes education of drivers and education of drivers and education of public. We made significant changes and ideas to increase patronage. We made significant changes to be able to grasp innovation and technology for the future. And we also, in this plan, acknowledged that not only does a PT network need to be efficient and of high quality, but it actually needs to be enjoyable as well. And I think that will get, if we can grab that in the future and implement those ideals in this and those goals in the plan, that's where we'll get the significant change, because this is making a level of service better for those who already use it, but the step change to reducing emissions is to get those people that drive a car thinking, gee, if I take the bus, it's going to be more enjoyable, faster, better, cheaper, and all of those things. So that's the majority of people that I think this plan actually aims to attract, and that's a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Leary. As there are no further lights on, we will look to move the recommendation. So all those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, everyone. All right, next item. Hamilton Bus Network Refresh. Andy, thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee members. So this is the first of 3 reports I've got for you today. So this report provides an update on a consultation that we recently went out for some changes to the Hamilton bus network. So most of the changes were aimed at the eastern side of the city. We'd previously consulted on some changes associated with the launch of the Meteor service on the west of the city, and we took the opportunity just to remind people of those changes, because they have been delayed, unfortunately, due to the driver shortage. So the consultation was undertaken from 7th of June to the 4th of July this year. I think one of the key factors that is important to recognise as we went into this consultation is that people are travelling differently. So in Hamilton, we are down approximately 30% on patronage compared to pre-COVID. We are recovering slowly, but there's good reason to believe that that people's movement patterns have changed substantially, at least for the foreseeable future. And some of the service changes that we've aimed at consulting on are to allow us to be a little more nimble and flexible, but also recognising that we don't perhaps quite need the extent of capacity that we have on the network as previously, and that factors such as reliability are going to be really important in getting people to get back on the buses. So those are really the key things that we wanted to set out with the changes that we consulted on. So broadly speaking, it can divide the changes that we consulted on into north and south of East Hamilton. So the Rototuna and Flagstaff area, One of the main proposals was that we were going to introduce the Flex bus service to the Rototuna area. And I have to say the consultation feedback that we received for the introduction of Flex was overwhelmingly positive, resounding enthusiasm for the introduction of Flex to that area. And just a reminder as to why we've chosen the Rototuna and Flagstaff areas as really the first step in perhaps a broader rollout of on-demand services to Hamilton City. There is a roading network in that area that is very much of its era. It is quite difficult to serve that area effectively with fixed route bus services due to the number of cul-de-sacs and restricted turning movements that are in the area. So we thought that Flex would be a great addition to the bus network in that area, noting that we are proposing to scale back some of the fixed route bus services in that area and replace entirely the Rototuna Circular service, which is a fixed route bus service that does a circular route of Rototuna and Flagstaff areas. It has been quite poorly patronised since it was introduced, and it gets a very poor fare box return on that service. By enabling an on-demand service, we provide people with a faster pick up and drop off, and in potentially in some cases more direct, quicker travel as well. The other thing I should just note is that in looking at contextualising some of the fixed route bus service options in the report, we will be supporting travel to and from Rototuna and Flagstaff areas, to and from Chartwell Shopping Centre to allow transfer onto other fixed route bus services. So the proposal to replace the Rototuna circular route, we are proposing to keep the fixed route portions of those services that provide access to and from the CBD. And the idea is to actually speed up some of the travel times between those areas which are located quite far away from the CBD. But we know that there are a lot of commuters that travel into the CBD from Flagstaff and Rototuna areas in particular. So I won't go too much over the detail of which routes are going down particular roads. I think hopefully that's explained quite clearly in the report. We also took a number of submission points feedback on board, and so for the Flagstaff route, we are actually proposing to go back out to consultation on that route, and taking out the Chartwell connection for the Flagstaff service. So it's still possible to travel to Chartwell from Flagstaff area via Flex and the Orbiter service, but there would no longer be that connection via the Flagstaff service. Because we recognise that a high proportion of people that are using that route do use that service to access Chartwell at the moment, about 30%. We are proposing to go back out to consultation for both route options, which wasn't previously consulted on, with the advice that people will be able to catch the Orbiter to Chartwell, or indeed get Flex to Chartwell. For the Chartwell route, there is proposed to be extended up through Huntington, St James, through to Rototuna North, providing that connection along Kimbray Drive for the retirement community, and the number of residential properties that are springing up around that area. That route we are proposing to make a few modifications to. It will make the journey into town approximately the same distance on average, but probably a little bit more reliable, particularly during the peak periods, due to the avoidance of some right turns out onto River Road, which can be quite challenging during the peaks. Then we moved into the sort of southern section of the consultation. So both the 11 Fairfield and 14 Chartwell services are or did run under a 30-minute headway prior to the introduction of the reduced timetables. So what we're suggesting now is when those routes go back to a normal service, that those routes would run every 40 minutes instead of every 30 minutes. And the reason for that is twofold. Firstly, it's quite difficult to produce to run an efficient timetable on a every 30 minutes for a route that takes 30 minutes to complete, because that bus doesn't have any time to recover at the other end. So the aim of that is, as I said in the introduction, big part of that is to increase the reliability of those services, but also recognising that fewer people are travelling by bus, at least at the moment. University service. So that service is currently operating under an hourly timetable. Since the reduced timetables were introduced. The consultation proposal is to retain the reduced hourly frequency of the 13 university service. And the rationale for that is that the Meteor service, when it is introduced, will provide a much quicker, more direct, more frequent route into the CBD. So then looking at the 10 Hillcrest and 17 Gardens University changes. So we were proposing to swap the Jellicoe and Grey Street sections of those two routes around, so that the number 10 Hillcrest route would take approximately 6 minutes less time to get from Riverlea area into the CBD. And then have the 17 Hamilton Gardens route picking up the Jellicoe portion of that route. I think it's fair to say that consultation feedback on the proposal was mixed. So my recommendation is that we go out and do a bit more work on that. One of the key things that came back was a connection to schools in East Hamilton would be affected by that proposal. So it may be that we could introduce a dedicated school service potentially to solve that issue that some people were feeding back on. And I think that's pretty much it. We did go out to consultation for some feedback on the Comet route. Since we've done that, we've just been working with HCC to work through that feedback. A lot of the feedback was around infrastructure and walking routes and that kind of thing. So the latest date for the delivery of Glenview Bus Hub is towards the end of this year, beginning of next year. So I'd like to thank the Wakatahi team for assistance in pushing that project forward. I'll be very glad to see that facility built. I think it will make a major difference to travelling by bus in the area. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much and invite any questions.
Thanks, Andy, for your report and the summary you provided as well. Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Andy. I was just, I guess looking at the move to flex in that Waterturner area, I'm aware that we, from our last meeting, had some issues around driver availability for flex as well. What is that looking like at the moment? I guess I'm asking because we move to a new service, we want people's first experience, first few experiences to be.
Yeah, so in answer to your question, we won't launch that service until we're absolutely 100% confident that it can be delivered. The driver numbers, I understand, are looking very similar to what they were in February, which means that we have not made any progress so far this year. So we are in a little bit of a holding pattern at the moment, but yeah, we're trying to make as much progress on these initiatives as we can.
And when we last talked about the driver shortages, there was discussion around the PTOM model, you know, and since then we've had some new information come out. Has that changed anything for us, or are we still in the dark around the details of?
We're learning more about PTOM as every week passes, and as we get a further briefing from the agency or the ministry. But in respect of driver paying conditions and overall workforce related matters, there's a parallel piece of work being done actually ahead of finalising the detail of PTOM, which relates to driver workers and driver paying conditions, with a view to finding effectively the government finding a way to best allocate the $61 million of additional funding for driver wages that was announced some months ago now. That work's ongoing. In parallel with that, and as we continue to learn more, we'll continue to be working with our operators to make sure that we're all playing our part to make sure that we've got driver wages and conditions where they need to be. Probably just a little bit further to what Andy mentioned about current driver numbers. Overall things are fairly steady at the moment. We have had a slight improvement just recently in respect of the flex demand responsive driver workforce, which is enabling us. You might remember we haven't been able to quite operate the full contingent of vehicles and services associated with, in particular, the night rider service because of the hours of operation. That's been addressed, and I think this weekend just passed, or this one coming, we're up to full contingent of that service. So things are reasonably steady. It feels a little bit like we've got things are stabilising and hopefully improving.
Okay, and we discussed previously also, you know, directly marketing jobs for flex buses because of their different nature and potentially opening up opportunities for people who wouldn't drive a large bus. Has that happened from GoBus?
Yes, GoBus are specifically targeting different people with their marketing of roles for flex. You're absolutely right. They're much smaller vehicles. They still require a passenger licence. They're also far more amenable to part-time work. So they are taking a different approach to roles for flex, and it's my understanding of discussions with the operator, they are quite a different workforce. They keep them as effectively a separate workforce.
Okay, final question just on this case. So that's good to hear, though, that flex is back up to where it needs to be. I guess the final question is there more that we could be doing from a governance perspective, or kind of?
I think at the moment it will come back to, in the end, who pays how much in order to improve driver wages and conditions. We know that that's only one component of what's important to attract and retain any workforce. We know that there's a whole bunch of non-financial things as well. But I think the key thing at the moment is that in order to understand the platform that we're going forward on, therefore how all the pieces will come together across the operators' contributions into this, the government's contributions and local government's contributions, it's very difficult for us to understand exactly the role, how much, additional contribution might be required. I think everyone's aware that there will be additional contributions required. What we're trying to do for governance at the moment is get a really clear picture of what those requirements and contributions are likely to look like. As soon as we have that, then it will be something that we're able to make sure we've got whatever governance-related approvals and oversight required to make those adjustments. But at the moment, we're really just trying to get a clear picture of what all the contributions look like.
Thank you. Councillor Tegg.
Thanks. Andy, I wonder where we're up in our thinking around having the proposed flex service fully electric. I've got in front of me an article from The Conversation from a few days ago, which reviews the fully electric flex service in Takanini in South Auckland. And they're saying that they can cut 100,000 kgs of emissions from that service. It points out how, you can use existing charging infrastructure with smaller vehicles, so you don't have that roadblock with, for large buses and so on, where you need that mega charging ability. So I'm just wondering, are we thinking about going down that track with the service? Where are we at in terms of our thinking?
Yeah, so in terms of the existing service, we've got four diesel vehicles, two of which are low floor. At the time that we were talking to GoBus around fleet requirements for this new service, there were not on the market any suitable low floor accessible electric vehicles. Now I understand that has changed now. So in the future, should we be looking to extend or amend the fleet for the flex service, then I think electric would be definitely an option that would be preferred. As you say, the benefit of the smaller vehicles is you don't have the massive overhead of the charging infrastructure that you do for a huge bus. So relatively implementable in the short term. Yeah.
Just thinking that service in Auckland started in October last year. Started at the beginning with fully electric service. I'm just wondering, in terms of our negotiations with GoBus, that was available then. Why was it available for service?
Look, I'm afraid I don't have the answer to that question. I personally wasn't involved in those negotiations.
So is that contract now a sort of a done deal that we will continue with diesel, or is that something that's still open to negotiation?
One of the issues with the existing PTOM contracting model is they are 9-year contracts, and so there is a relatively modest amount of flexibility within those agreements over when and where fleet can be replaced, and this is particularly an issue that we have broader than flex, actually, across the whole Hamilton fleet, is that those contracts are up for negotiation in a few years' time, 2026, 2027. And that's obviously one of the reasons why the RPTP has gone down the route it's gone with emissions offsetting.
Because when the chap's name from GoBus came to the emissions hearing, he actually said they were open to renegotiating their electric vehicles. So I'd be keen to see, how far that's been explored with them. And I suppose it raises the other question with the new PTOM arrangements, and I know they're quite vague, but there is an indication that this council could own the vehicles and operate them themselves. And so I'm just floating the idea that we could have potentially a trial, where we actually do that and purchase some smaller vehicles that are fully electric. And, you know, if those contract negotiations are facing some roadblock to get to that, because that's certainly the point that's made in this article, that those smaller vehicles, you get to where you want with decarbonisation now. You don't have to wait for the contracts to be renewed. That infrastructure. You know, I suppose the message I'm giving is if we can move on this now, let's do that, whatever method.
Thank you through you, Chair. I think there's just a couple of things I'd draw attention to. One, absolutely the PTOM changes or the introduction of the Sustainable Transport Framework does provide opportunities, particularly to enable fleet transition. The second point I would say is that, as Andy rightly pointed out, in respect to the bulk of the fleet, we've got that for the duration of contract largely. But I think the point that Andy also made is that if we do have, where additional vehicles are required and where they're not currently locked into an existing contract, those are precisely the opportunities that we'll be running for. Any operator will, well, most operators, particularly the larger ones, are always keen to have conversations with us about anything outside of the scope of their existing contract, and that might include vehicle changes. That, of course, comes at a cost, and the closer we get to the end of the contract life, the greater surety on the long-term utilisation of those assets either we need or the operator needs, and that's factored into the costs of those changes as you would expect. So really the opportunity that we see is if there are additional vehicles required for flex in particular, we'll absolutely be looking at the extent to which we might be able to achieve zero emission vehicles through that, either by the operator or in light of the changes to the public transport framework. We've got new options around that, which may include now ownership of those vehicles.
So I'm just looking at the photo in front of me. It's actually got a sedan, a four-seater sedan, a Hyundai Ioniq. It's not even a bus they're using, at least for part of that. So.
Thanks, Dennis. I believe we initially were looking at those smaller vehicles, but we didn't believe they were quite big enough for what we needed. So, yeah, thanks for raising that point. Ollie.
Hi, so I use the Flex service on Saturday night to go out. And when I was getting off the bus, I very nearly had a very bad accident. I was in my power chair and the ramp was extremely steep and I almost sort of fell out forwards, which the weight of my power chair would have been quite uncomfortable. So I think part of the reason that happened is because the driver wasn't able to park next to the curb. So I guess my question is kind of a two-parter, really. One is around the procurement of the vehicles. You mentioned there's only 2 low-floor vehicles, and also around driver training. So around parking close to curb, so that the gradient of the bus or the ramp, sorry, is not too steep. So yeah, how does that process work? I was getting off. It was a Flex service, so it was at my place.
It was at your house.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, in that instance, when up next to a residential.
Andy, can you just pop your light on, please? Liz, can you just pop yours on and off? Andy, leave yours on.
Like musical chairs.
Liz, if you turn yours on.
In that instance, that is a driver training issue, and I will, if you can pass me the details of your complaint, I will follow that up for you. I would say that in order for us to provide a service that is properly accessible, Buses do need to be able to pull up against the curbside in a manner which is unobstructed. So when we pull up outside people's houses, I mean, it does rely on the infrastructure being there. It is a driveway to driveway service that we operate for anybody that flags that they've got a mobility issue. Particularly in the CBD, we have had and continue to have issues with cars being parked in designated bus stops for flex, and so quite often the flex driver will just have to make the best of a bad situation. There's not really a lot they can do if drivers are parked illegally in a bus bay. So.
And in regards to the procuring the vehicles, do you go out to consultation with the community?
So just to clarify your question, the two accessible vehicles, you're asking why the other two not fully accessible?
Yeah.
Okay. So the main reason for that is that with demand responsive services, we can actually send out the right type of vehicle to the right person. So if you are somebody with mobility issues, you should never get dispatched a vehicle that's not low floor, and we prioritise those vehicles for those who are disabled. The main reason that we've got two non-low floor vehicles in the fleet is that they are about half the price. So there is a cost factor, but we believe that the way that the system is managed, you should never notice that there is any kind of trade-off there, because we prioritise those low floor vehicles for those with mobility issues.
Thanks, Ollie. Yeah, it's always good to have that first-hand experience, so thank you for raising that. Liz, you're next.
Thank you. Thank you to the chair. Hey, I think most of you know that I'm a pretty big fan of Flex, and I appreciate that this is a Hamilton refresh agenda item, so I won't stray too far. But I'd really like to start a conversation, Andrew, for Cambridge, because we're looking for an internal public transport plan, but also something that we can deliver hopefully in the next couple of years or even before, if possible. And it just makes sense that Flex is probably that solution. So, yeah, if we can start a conversation, I think that would be really, really good. It just seems like this particular system is working really well to date. And yeah, let's start talking.
Yeah, look, thank you for that. I received the invitation for the Cambridge transport strategy in my inbox on Friday, I believe. So I look forward to taking up those conversations in the workshop.
Cool, thanks, Andy. Hey, just on just following up on Councillor Thompson's questions around flex drivers up in Rotatuna. So part of what we're proposing is that we're taking one bus service off and putting flex in its place. So am I right in assuming that those bus drivers would transfer, or are you looking at transferring the bigger buses plus those drivers somewhere else?
Yeah, so there is a bit of maths involved. It's not a straight swap from the Rotatuna circular to flex. We do have 4 large buses trundling around empty in Rotatuna at the moment. However, we do need to provide that connectivity into the CBD. So that's why the proposals are framed the way that they are, with the extension of the Flagstaff and the 5 Chartwell services. So those will require a couple of drivers to do that as well. Yeah, I mean, this if it were just a matter of a straight swap between the Rotatuna circular and flex, yeah, would not be concerned, but we do need to provide those connections into the CBD as well.
Thank you. And just further, you mentioned that the consultation raised a few issues, so we're going to go back out for consultation. Yeah, I'm really pleased that we're doing that. You know, are we going to change some of the questions that we're asking next time? Or what will the consultation look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So the consultation next time will be much more targeted to the users of those particular bus routes that are effective. And where I've outlined in the report that there's a choice to be made, we'll be very clear about what the trade-offs are. In that way, we are going from a consultation which sought quite general feedback to a much more specific targeted engagement exercise. And I think it's actually been one small saving grace of the fact that we're not rushing towards a deadline on this, and that we can actually take the time to get this perfectly right.
Perfectly. Cool, thank you. I read in the notes that the number 5 is perhaps going to go overlap on the number 14 route. Will you be consulting those number 14 affected people? Because in essence, would part of that route get double the service?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. We would be looking to review the number 14 route, but we would consider that to be not critical for the implementation of the refresh proposals. But yes, I am aware there is an overlap. Yeah.
Okay. Would the timing be so maybe that bit of the journey wouldn't be both at the same time? You wouldn't see 2 buses coming at the same time?
When scheduling, there's always a multiplicity of different factors and constraints that you have to take into account. We would certainly aim that there wouldn't be 2 buses arriving within 2 minutes of each other down that stretch, but there are many other factors that we need to take into account when developing timetables.
Thank you. Just a few more questions. I've spoken to a number of older people up in that area who are very excited about Flex coming, and I talked to them about the ability for them to book, perhaps as a body corp or a committee, to book it a week ahead. And they were incredibly excited about that, especially you know, as their communities of interest are up outside of Chartwell or Rotorua Village. So yeah, are we able to, my next question would be, when people saw that a bus service might be taken away, did they understand that Flex would then be available, or were there some people who didn't quite understand that through the consultation?
From the consultation feedback that I read, most people did understand that Flex was a replacement for some of the journeys that they would have otherwise been making. It wasn't universally grasped, I have to say, but I believe the vast majority did. That the concept was conveyed.
And my final question, seeing as we are going out for consultation again, the cost of that further consultation, is that likely to be significant, or is it more just online and staff time?
Yeah. Hey, look, I don't have a cost estimate to hand. We would be targeting for the reconsultation specific bus routes and specific bus stops. It might be that we decide to do flyers in individual areas. Flyers are quite expensive. So I don't have a cost estimate at the moment, but there will be a cost to it.
And just in terms of effectiveness, do you find flyers to be effective, or is it more online these days?
So with this consultation, we did get over 500 submissions. The vast majority of people feedback online, but I feel like the actual means that they feedback on probably isn't representative of the way that they first heard about the consultation. So just making people aware that there is potential change coming, then they can react and decide what channel to provide the feedback through.
Fantastic. So what I'm hearing you say is that flyers and online are useful for different things.
Yes.
Cool, thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I was just wanting to pick up Councillor Tegg's feedback around comments around the on-demand service and moving to electric vehicles. And I'd like to put forward a motion or an amendment to this, to move this with an amendment, which says that every effort is made to make this service and any future on-demand services fully electric or fully zero emission. And I'm open to alternative wording, but essentially,
Just bearing in mind, we've just done the RPTP with zero emissions procurement. But I'll let Mark add his thoughts.
We haven't had, I guess, confirmation that the next buses are going to be electric. So we're still not sure on that, are we?
Yeah, through Madam Chair, I would say that subject to decision making on the 25th of this month, policy P2 in the draft RPTP will confirm that from 2023 onwards, all newly built buses introduced in the PT fleet will be zero emissions. And I would say that I know that also presents some challenges, including Waka Kotahi funding policy at the moment. So just acknowledging that, but that will be the policy that applies. So I think we'll be, assuming that any new vehicles came into the flex fleet, we would be, as Andy said, taking that opportunity to ensure that those additional vehicles are zero emission as well. So I think on that, it's to add a resolution here would be, I think it would be it wouldn't make much difference either way, to either leave it simply within the scope of the PT plan or to duplicate it here effectively.
Is the new flex service in Rotuna going to require the procurement of new vehicles?
So no is the short answer to that. So we have one vehicle that's being operated during the week for the airport service. We've got 4 vehicles in total. So those 4 vehicles I obviously use for the nighttime and evening service at the weekends. But we do have 3 vehicles spare during the week, and the modelling indicates that that is sufficient capacity to provide for the needs of an area of Flagstaff and Rotuna for the time being. If demand does grow, then we will look to add additional electric vehicles to the fleet.
Okay.
Dave, do you want to add democracy's advice?
Sure. Looking at the scope of the report that we're talking to at the moment, it's primarily a discussion on the bus network and to introduce changes to the actual buses themselves would be out of scope in terms of this report. If the committee had a wish to explore that, then they would need to, as Mark has alluded, refer back to the new plan that we're in the process of adopting, or request a report to cover that specifically.
Okay, but essentially, assuming the new plan is adopted, it would be from 2023, they'd be electric anyway. Yeah. Okay.
Which is when the new bus contracts start coming around.
Yes, in fact, the 2023 would be ahead of the new bus contract. So that means that, as Councillor Tegg pointed out before, including with the current operator and the current contracts, if new vehicles are required through that, then any newly built vehicles that come into the fleet, we would expect them to be zero emission vehicles, be they flex or whatever else.
Cool, thank you. Right, as there are no further questions, is there any discussion or debate or anything anyone would like to add? Okay. The resolution is up on the screen. We've just added in paragraph 78, which you can read in front of you. I'm happy to, do we have a mover, Dave? If you can just scroll it down. I am happy to move this one. Councillor Thompson's happy to second it. Anyone like to discuss or debate what we've just talked about? No, as I can see no lights or no indication that anyone would like to. Let's move the report. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Right, we're going to take a short 10-minute break, a cup of tea, drink, etc., etc. And we will come back at 11:20. Thank you.